There are two different types of counter jungling. One is where you steal the enemy jungler's buffs or camps, and the other is where you kill them in their own jungle. We're going to be jungling Amumu today, and as Amumu is not a strong duelist, we'll be sticking to stealing the enemy jungler's camps. Now you might think to yourself that Amumu is not a strong counter jungler and this is a crazy idea. And you are right. The reason we'll be counter jungling with Amumu is precisely because of that. We want to embarrass the enemy jungler and make them feel bad. You see, junglers are quite irritable and they tend to get angry if their buffs get stolen. Having it stolen by a jungle Amumu makes it even worse because no one ever sees it coming. In order to pull this off, we will be taking advantage of habits that people have developed in ranked solo queue. Junglers tend to start on the bottom side of the map with the help of their AD carry and support. They do this because it reduces the amount of damage they take and allows them to clear better. There's a number of different paths that they can take after getting their first camp with the help of the AD carry and support, but in all cases this leaves the top side of their jungle open for an invade. Now when it comes to invading the topside enemy jungle, a rookie mistake a lot of people make is they get too eager and rush in right away. You never rush in right away into the enemy jungle because odds are you will run into someone who is guarding the enemy jungler's buffs. An interesting fact of solo queue is that whoever is guarding the enemy jungler's second buff, if they are guarding it at all, will leave somewhere around a minute 30 to a minute 40 to go to their lanes. It's very rare that they'll leave a trinket behind, which means that it can go into the enemy jungle after 1 minute and 40 seconds into the game with good odds that I have not been spotted. Now while I am clearing the enemy red buff with a little bit of help from Hecarim, I could actually have soloed it if I wanted to, in the case that Hecarim had chosen not to help. After taking the enemy jungler's red buff, I go back to my own jungle routes, eventually taking both of my buffs. Now depending on how aggressive the enemy jungler is, I could have gone immediately to my own red after taking his red, but given how weak Kha'Zix is in the early game jungle, I knew that I had a bit of flexibility in my jungle route. Since I know that Kha'Zix started on the bottom side of the map and that I started at his red buff, I know that both his red and his blue will be up 5 minutes later. What's important is that I know that Kha'Zix knows that I've got the timing on his red buff. Given that the red buff helps him with ganks, odds are he'll try to cover his red buff when it respawns because he doesn't want me to take it again. I see Kha'Zix head in the direction of his red buff after I gank at mid. I know that his blue buff is coming up soon, so I decide to go for his blue while Kha'Zix goes to cover his red. Once again, I'm counting on the complete lack of coordination in ranked solo queue as the enemy team is not looking out for their jungler. This allows me to steal his blue buff. Unfortunately, Cho'Gath does come by to take the blue buff as most mid laners do, and he spots me. Knowing that there is no safe passage back, I decide to suicide inside the enemy base, taking the enemy jungler's blue buff with me. And this was totally worth it since I had planned on recalling anyway. Once I respawn, I take my blue buff and continue jungling normally. We went on to win this game, and in the post-game lobby I had a chat with the enemy Kha'Zix, who confirmed that he did not enjoy this game at all getting counter-jungled by an Amumu. This means we got the desired effect we were looking for, ruining the game for the enemy jungler. In summary, what you want to do is go into the enemy topside jungle after 1 minute and 40 seconds. After you take their buff, go back and secure your red and your blue. And then keep an eye out for the 7-minute mark and try to figure out which buff the enemy jungler wants more to improve his ganks. If he'll have better ganks with his red buff, go for his blue. If he depends on his blue, go for his red. While I took the enemy jungler's buffs at 2 minutes and 7 minutes in these examples, it's also possible to continue stealing their buffs at 12 minutes, 17 minutes and so forth, provided you time the respawn on their buffs and keep an eye on the movement of the enemy jungler around the time their buffs should be respawning. Will the strategy work 100% of the time? No, of course not. It will fail a few times, but more often than not, it will work and catch your opponents by surprise because no one ever expects to get counter-jungled by an Amumu.